Why don't we call to order the continuation of the public hearing with respect to the special permit held by Historic New England at 1426 Canton Avenue. This hearing was originally convened on July 2nd at the request of John Corey by application dated May 28th. That application was supplemented with a communication to Mr. Donnelly on May 29 and the additional documents in the file related to the application consist of a July 1st letter from Marion McKettrick, attorney for the holder of the permit, Historic New England, a letter from Mr. Hill, counsel to the abutter, Mr. Corey and Mr. Rosales, dated July 2nd. That was supplemented by a PowerPoint presentation that was made at the July 2nd hearing. During that hearing, due to the nature of the issues that were raised and the sensitivity with respect to the property, the board requested and the applicant agreed and the abutter agreed to continue this hearing to tonight, at which time we will further consider the issues that have been presented at this hearing. We have a July 16th, 2025 letter from Mrs. McKettrick. Thank you for that. And we recently received, and when I say recently, I have to say like a half an hour ago from Mr. Hill, a letter that responds in some respects, I think, but I haven't read it. The July 2nd letter, which is part of the record and will be in the file. But Mr. Hill, I have to tell you, this is the second time that this has happened. You can't keep giving the board materials 10 minutes before the hearing. It's just not fair. It's not fair to us. It's not fair to the applicant. So I don't know what to say about that, but it's disrespectful to the town. So I just want to make that, and I want that to be official part of the record. I'm sorry, but you can't expect us to reply to these and to consider these in detail when we're offered these 20 minutes before the hearing started, knowing that we're working full-time jobs, as are you. So, okay, I got that off my chest, but I needed to say it. I wanted it to be officially part of the record, and I want the abutters to hear it as well. It's disrespectful to everybody involved in the hearing. We will hear from you tonight, but you can't expect the board to have had the time to review the matters that this hearing deserves. Okay, with that said, Mrs. McKettrick, I see that you're here to ask for you to supplement your remarks and comment on the issues that were raised at the prior hearing to the extent that you'd like to, and then we'll hear from Mr. Hill on behalf of the abutters. Mrs. McKettrick.
Thank you very much. I'm Mary McKettrick. I represent Historic New England, the holder of this permit. I have given you a memo several pages long, and also with that memo there were some exhibits which Historic New England spent quite a bit of time preparing in between the two hearings, and they were to supplement material for the board to have to understand the site. And in addition, the question that the board asked at the last hearing was, what's happened since the permit was issued? What have you been doing here? So they actually went back and prepared for it. And I'm not going to summarize the whole report for you now, but I will say a couple of things. First of all, operation didn't begin till 2017. It's pretty typical of a special permit like this. It's passed, it's endorsed by the board, but then there's a lot of work that has to be done before the operation can commence. So it's been actually more like 8 years that Eustis Estate has been operating as a museum. But from the time that they opened, or before they opened, they not only paid, a very substantial sum to purchase this property. They spent a great deal of money, time, and effort and research to prepare the site for public visitors, and then also to restore the historic building where necessary, repair it where necessary. But, for example, they documented the site's history, its topography and plantings. They restored and repaired the buildings and grounds. They prepared the grounds for the public. They had to put in water line. They had to put in a new entry for a private driveway so they wouldn't have to come in on Chestnut Run. And they had to, update all the, electrical service and fire protections and all the things that you have to have in a building that the public's going to be in. In addition, the site is now on the National Historic Register. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. All the new water power and data systems are now in place. And there is a reception in what was a former garage, a single-story building behind the main building. There is now a reception desk, a reception area, and they have certain historic files that they keep in there. They have had, just in 2024, 13,000 visitors came to this site. These are people, could be people just come up and take one visit, walk around outside. But that's a lot of people that have been able to access this historic property and see how beautiful it is. And that includes people that also attended special events. They've hosted a summer concert series that's with local partners. They partnered with the Boston Outdoor Preschool Network, and they now conduct, this is starting in 2024, a nature immersive preschool on the grounds during the weekdays. So their programs, I mean, they've had crafts fairs. They do have a whole series of concerts in the summertime, different types of concerts. They have a celebration on Juneteenth, which already occurred this year. And in addition, they allow certain private parties to come in by permit who pay and who may have amplified sound at those events. And those end up being weddings, and they don't have very many. They're allowed to have as many as 12 a year to a month, but they've had 2 or 3 in the last 2 years. Those do raise money directly for Historic New England, and those were part of the original permit. So they have not violated their original permit. There hasn't been a complaint of a violation. There's no record that I could find in the building department of anything like that. The second part of what I included with my letter was a series of photos and then the original existing condition map called the view shed, which shows the whole site, shows the topography, shows the plantings, and generally where there's vegetation and where there isn't vegetation. Because Historic New England has not taken out, other than invasive plants, they haven't removed any vegetation. So that view shed hasn't changed very much, and that's purposeful because that's part of what makes this estate. This is why it was so unique. It was up on a hill. It was located where there were sloping fields, and you could see the sunset, and you could see in the distance trees and shrubs. They maintained all that. The photographs are from very recent. They're from last week, whenever they were taken, they're dated. And they show viewpoints, and they also provide the viewpoints with the viewshed map showing you from where the photograph was taken, just to show you that from many viewpoints along the lot line, you cannot even see, the garage or particularly the parking area. So, if there's an issue where there's some more vegetation needed, it's only in certain areas. And as I explained in my letter, the position Historic New England has taken, up till now at least, is that the neighbors can plant more vegetation on their own property. And in fact, although there were restrictions on that originally, Historic New England has told them they should feel free to plant as much vegetation as they want. It can be low bushes, it can be trees, it can be whatever, will help them with the problem of what they don't want to see. And then finally, we did provide some letters of support. A lot of these are just, they're from organizations that Historic New England has worked with. Some of them are quite detailed and lengthy and explain just how valuable and useful the collaboration has been, how much how much they would like to continue it. And those are just provided for extra background for you. So just to go to my letter, the main purpose of the letter was to respond to changes in conditions. And I'm going to just briefly explain offering to change or would agree to. And we do feel that these might help with some of the issues. The first one is that we would place on file with the Milton Police Department 24-hour contact information for the site manager at Historic New England. The site manager is the person who knows when there's an event going on, who the on-site management people are and how to contact them and can contact them. So if there's an immediate problem that's being complained about, the instructions would be, you call the police department, they have this information, they will immediately contact the site manager, and the site manager will take whatever further steps are necessary. This is a mechanism that the town uses with construction projects and other projects where there might be ongoing issues of this nature. The police department can do this, and they have done it for other projects and developments. Historical New England is certainly happy to comply with a requirement that all their outside site lighting be dark sky compliant and that it be shielded in the direction of neighboring properties. And there's a light that was an issue in the complaint from the neighbors. They're not using that light, and we provided specifications for substitute lighting that would be shielded and dark sky compliant. They'd be happy to install that lighting. There would be a requirement that no trespassing signs be erected along the border with 1452 Canton Ave. This has already been completed. This is one way of reminding people who are on the site that's open to the public that there's a border there and that they're not to go on to neighboring properties. And the final condition would be that on-site management be provided for each event on the premises. That is the practice. Historic New England doesn't hold an event that doesn't have an on-site manager. And I've explained how there could be contact with that on-site manager during an event if there was a complaint. But we think it's an appropriate condition, and Historic New England would certainly comply with that condition. There are a number of other conditions which I review in some detail in my letter that relate to restricting the amount of parking on the property, restricting the number of events, restricting the size of the events, locking the gate at the end of their driveway up to the building. And in general, most of those restrictions would, in the way that they are requested, would dramatically change the operation of the Eustis estate. It would not be what the special permit allowed. And I think it's very important to keep in mind that Historic New England has made a huge investment in this property. It's been enjoyed by thousands of people and is continuing to be enjoyed. They not only purchased it, but they also upgraded it and improved it. All of that was based on the assumption that they would be able to operate under the parameters of their original special permit. If there are particular issues that can be addressed, and I think some of them are by the conditions that we've proposed, then they should be. And that's the purpose, I think, in part of coming back after 10 years after the permit's issued to review all the conditions and see what can be done. I too received the letter from Attorney Hill. I didn't even see it until about 5 minutes ago because I was eating dinner, so I didn't look at my emails. I got it at 6 o'clock tonight. And I did notice one thing, which is that he reviews conditions that were in his letter. And then we had a list of conditions that the neighbors provided at the hearing and a nice PowerPoint, with table with conditions in it. And I think we focused particularly on answering those requests for conditions. And I hope that you find that we have done that thoroughly in the letter. There may be a couple of conditions that the attorney talked about. They weren't repeated at the hearing, and we weren't sure whether they were still live requests, but we do have responses. However, it's a problem because we just got this information now. So what I thought you might want to do would be to, I would say, ask specific questions. If you don't want to do that, I can go in more detail over our responses to each condition that the neighbors asked for. I'm not sure what it would be best. The chair will decide how to proceed.
Yeah, no, thank you. Let me ask, Marion, is that we're going to conduct it. Let me try this. It may make sense given the fact that you and we just became aware of this information to
Mhm.
conduct the hearing a little bit different than the way I had proposed. We'll hear from you, so consider that an introductory statement, and you let us know whether or not your introductory statement is complete. We'll then ask Mr. Hill if he wants to supplement or comment on anything that he wants to call particular attention, and of course, the abutters can comment on that, and then you can comment again and supplement and respond to that, maybe have more of a conversation. Of course, members of the board can ask questions at any time, and at the appropriate time, before we conclude the evidentiary portion of the hearing, we'll ask for testimony from persons supporting or in opposition to it, as we normally do. Is that acceptable to everybody in terms of the conduct of this hearing?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Hill, welcome to the board.
Thank you very much, members of the board. For the record,
You're
my name is Dan Hill. I'm the attorney for the neighbors, Miguel and John, who are here tonight. Just with respect to my memo that I sent in about an hour ago, I apologize for springing that on you. It really was meant to be an outline for my comments tonight. It wasn't, it was just basically a tracker of the conditions, and in hindsight, I shouldn't have sent it. I just wanted to basically write down on paper in an organized fashion, the conditions that we requested on July 2nd, the response by Historic New England on July 16th, and then, our rebuttal to those comments. So, Mr. Chairman, I think just in terms of an opening statement, I think my concern, broadly speaking, is that maybe one of the proposed conditions was agreed to by Historic New England. The rest of them were rejected, and we don't feel that the rationale for the rejection of our conditions is reasonable. And I can get into those, and we can discuss, modifications or perhaps shortcomings or strengths. But in general, I think our overall concern, just what kind of led us here, was that that there has been an expansion of the special events that have been occurring on the property in the last 8 years, both in terms of the size and the frequency. And I don't know if I'm disputing Marion's contention that there has been no violations. There probably haven't been, but I think that the permit that was issued in 2015 carried with it some expectations that Historic New England was going to be operating under. And at least from my perspective, as somebody who was there, some of the board members were there, I think that it's kind of going beyond what was contemplated, and we're actually more concerned about what it could be, because I feel like there's not adequate parameters in the 2015 special permit. And one perfect example is the parking. And then I don't want to get into specifics, but just as an example, there is no limit in the special permit as to how many cars can come on the property. And there should be. I think everybody can probably agree that this 80 acres should not become a concert venue or a wedding venue or something to that effect. I'm not saying Historic New England's planning on doing that, but without parameters to set expectations, things could get out of control very easily. And so what we've proposed is what we think is reasonable limitations. And, no one's perfect. We aren't perfect. If there's different ways of attacking this, we want to work with the board and Historic New England as good neighbors, but we expect that Historic New England would also work with us as good neighbors. So that's kind of where we are today, I think. And, I'm happy to go through the conditions. We haven't changed the conditions. We have I think, 9 conditions that we started with, and I'd be happy to go through each one. I think we do have, Miguel has some slides that he'd like to show that get into some of the landscaping that we had proposed. I think there was some concerns, especially from Historic New England, about the landscaping blocking access, blocking pedestrian access, and so forth. And Miguel's slides, I think, do a good job of presenting that visual of what exists today, what the view sheds really are, and we don't agree with the comment that there already is screening. The view sheds that exist today, and what we would propose as really modest shrubs and associated screening. So, Mr. Chairman, obviously it's your call if you want to have Miguel present those slides now, and then we can get into the conditions, or.
Well, I'm not going to object to having the abutter make a presentation, but you just spent most of your presentation, in fact, all of your presentation about the number of events. And yet we're going to ask your client to speak about the shielding. Is it the number of events and the operational issues, or is it the landscaping that is the issue, or is it both? And if it's both, you should just say it's both.
Yeah, no, I think it is both. I think we
Okay, that's not what
think-
you said though, but okay.
Oh, well, we think there should be 12 events, and that's what we said in our original proposal.
But that's not what the special permit requires. Can we agree on that?
The special permit limits the sound amplified events to 12.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. Okay.
Yep. And so what we would
Which, as you
propose,
recall, was a big issue at that hearing. In
Yeah.
fact, was probably the issue.
yeah, and I think that as we've experienced these events, I think it's not just sound, right? It's parking, it's cars going in the wrong driveway, it's people traipsing around, it's the craft fair that takes up a big part of the field. So it's not just sound, and that's why we all in the original condition also limited special events to members of Historic New England. And I would say that's not reasonable either. So I think Historic New England should have the public come on their property. So we would propose eliminating that, which benefits Historic New England, but we also think there should be some limits in terms of the events, not just about sound.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Rosales. Thank you, Mr. Hill. Mr. Rosales, do you wish to be heard?
Yes, yes, I'm just going to share my screen.
You should be able to do so now.
Okay, can you see the screen now?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity to speak about these issues in relation to the Justice Estate. I think that in general, what we want to try to find is a harmonious relationship with the museum. You know, we use the house and we expect to have a reasonable well-being and quiet and, you know, enjoy the property. And we're trying to find a way to balance this with having a museum next to us and having a, you know, all sorts of events. So we're trying to find a balance and see how, you know, how could this situation could be improved. We also spent a lot of money and time on the house. When we bought it in 2017, it was completely dilapidated. It was almost going to fall down, as you can see from these photos. And we brought it all back. And I think now it's an excellent example of how to restore a house and bring it to a position where it can be livable. And we would like to enjoy it. And we would like to have a way to, you know, coexist with Historic New England and the museum. And that's what we're trying to do here. Try to see if we can have a better balance of the situation. I think the two issues that we have is one is the landscape buffers and the other one is the special events. Both of those are concerns that we have, and we had this for a very, very long time. And in terms of the landscape buffers, I just wanted to point again that in 2015, buffers were added, but they were always added towards the back of the property that relates to the other neighbors, not toward our property. And I think that's happened because we did not own the house at that time, and Historic New England owned that house. So, you know, when they sell it to us, you know, the situation changed. And we think that we could have similar buffers that what the other neighbors have. And actually, we think that it will improve the landscape. And we don't see how the low buffers will impact the views or impact the operations of the museum or reaching, for example, the bathrooms. And, you know, I made a lot of effort to make slides that would show, you know, what would look like if we put, you know, some buffers in certain areas. This drawing also shows the parking that we thought that was the limitations that were included in the special permit, 48 permanent cars and 56 cars that were for overflow parking. We would believe that this is sufficient to have some kind of control on the size of the events. I mean, having events that have 800 visitors doesn't seem to be wiser or, you know, conducive to a good relationship in a residential area. So my understanding was during the hearing that this amount of parking was used as a limitation, as a maximum. Perhaps that wasn't the case, but, you know, that was our expectation. So as I mentioned before, there exist buffers towards the other houses, to the other neighbors, but not towards our house. And these are some of the things that were installed in 2015. There is other buffers next to the visitor center. We were thinking that something similar to what already exists could be extended in certain areas to block some of the views. There is also a buffer, when you come into the visitor center. So it's definitely landscaping. The problem is that all the landscaping is behind the area that we want to shield. So as you can see here, both the overflow parking and the parking lot is completely visible, from our property. Right now in the summer, there is weeds and vegetation under the trees. So right now the visibility is not as open as it could be. However, most of the year in the winter and in the fall, all of these weeds die or the deer eat it, and then it's completely open. So you cannot take photos right now and assume that the views are not there because most of this property has deciduous trees, all the leaves fall down, and all of the weeds cannot die over the winter. So the view is very, very open. It's not a shielded view. And we actually have spent a lot of time and buy a lot of plants trying to put plants on our property. We already have done that. However, because the trees are so massive and it's so shady, it's very hard to do planting that will survive in that area. So we feel like some modest landscaping on the Eustis estate will help a lot the situation. So what we are proposing is some landscaping, a low-level landscaping around the parking lot, and some additional landscaping near our house because of the overflow parking, for these amplified music events that happen quite frequently. Actually, this year they will probably have 8 to 9 events. So it's not, a few events, there are a lot of events. So these are some of the areas that we're concerned, especially the parking, the visitor center, which I think is not compatible as historically with either with the mansion of Eustis Estate or our house. I mean, it's a building that was added in the 1950s. It has a completely barren space in front with no landscaping at all, which we don't understand why that needs to be when you already have landscaping, on the side. I mean, the dumpster, we see it. I think that, there is an effort to put some wood over it, but it's still a dumpster. It'll be good. There will be some landscaping that, that screens some of that. And of course, when you have, big events like the one recently they had in June, the cars are all over the place and we definitely get very, very close to our property. The lighting that they have installed, I think that the lighting should not be allowed to have lighting toward our property. I mean, I think you want to have lighting in the parking lot. I think that's okay. But all of this lighting is for the, basically the weddings and the night events. They will bring their own lighting. So we're not sure why you have to have lighting, that is for those events when they will have their own generators and their own lighting. They could be improved. I think what they have right now is not historically appropriate, and we wouldn't want to do the same situation. But we are concerned about having lights, looking towards our property. These are some other views when you have the large events. So these are a series of views from our property or from certain locations in the site that shows what will happen if you do a low level, let's say 45 inches or kind of railing level of landscaping. So this is what exists right now, and this is how it will look like. It will hide some of the cars. It will also hide some of the aspects of the visitor center. It will not impede the views. You still will have access to come into the area from different locations because it's not a continuous hedge. And actually, I think it looks better. Actually, it makes the site actually look better. This is looking towards the fields. I think I don't see how this blocks the view of the mountains or the hills. Also, in addition to that, the minute that you step out of the parking lot and you go into the fields, the trees are completely open. So we don't know exactly why Historic Line is so reluctant to add, some level of landscaping in the area. It's another view from the side. And some of these landscapes already exist. If you look at the one that is on the left side, that exists at this moment. So we're just asking to extend it a little bit more, in areas that are visible, that block the cars. I think nobody wants to see cars I mean, I think that that's not something that visitors come to want to see. And if you're in the field, it would be much nicer to have a shield that, kind of blocks the size of the cars and also the glare. At night, you see the lights coming in. It also reflects a lot because, it's very sunny there. So, it's a lot of reflections there. So I think this will mitigate part of that. And we don't understand why Historian New England is saying that you cannot get to the bathrooms. I mean, there is a lot of locations where you could walk to the bathrooms. So that's also not a justification, I think, for not allowing to have some landscaping. And what we have said all along is the property line is very, very long. So it will be much easier to put some landscaping on the areas that are problematic than to try to shield the whole site, especially because the area that is related to our house doesn't have any landscaping except the weeds and the tall trees. The area that is towards Canton Avenue that has the area of the mansion, I think in the past they did a lot of screening. Actually, they had rhododendrons, they have evergreens. A lot of screening was done there, but not in this part of the property. So actually, it'll be nice for us to see the mansion. That area is completely blocked, and not see the parking lot and not see the visitor center. So actually, that's one of the situations that we have, that the site is not treated equally, between the area between the mansion and Canton Avenue and between the mansion and our property to the end. These some other views. We would suggest that it will be the same type of vegetation that, was installed for the neighbors in 2015, basically evergreen. So, during the winter, they're still effective. And they could stay low. They don't need to be high. We just basically want to block the cars and block some of the aspects of that barren area in the visitor center. When we get closer to the house, you can see here how in the winter it's completely open, and you can see all of the facilities, including the parking lot. We think some additional buffer will help, especially for the special event when you have so many cars, coming very, very close to the house. And this could be, something that could be added. In terms of the gate, I mean, I think that our concern is that we understand that nobody lives in the house and nobody's there at night. So, there is no security at night in the museum. We don't know if there is any cameras or anything like that, but in the past, when we asked if somebody was sleeping at the mansion, nobody sleeps there. There's no caretaker. Also, in the past, when we had problems with some of the weddings, we have asked Historian New England if there was somebody from the museum at the location of the wedding. They told us there was not, and that they rely on the caterers to control who comes into the museum. So to us, this is problematic because there have been instances when we had to have the police. There have been activities in the museum that were not, kosher. A lot of people were congregating there at night. So it's been an issue. And if you look at this map in 2001, the main gate of the mansion was through the building. There was a gate there that existed there. That was closed by Historic New England because they didn't want to use the main gate. They wanted to use a separate access. So, this main gate where, there was some kind of control when they used to say it was a private residence, is closed now. They have a chain and they park in that location and they open a new driveway, where the stone wall is, which is, quite open. So this is the current condition. You can see, that's how that area is closed. And then you have a new driveway that was added, when the museum started to operate and when they sold us the house. This is how it's right now. It's completely open. There is no control at night. Anybody at night can come inside. And I think it's unsafe in some way. And I'm not completely understand how Historic New England is not worried that there could be some problem because nobody's living in the house at night. So, to us, that's problematic. And I understand that, adding a gate might be difficult to do, but at the minimum, you could do something like this, with a chain and just indicate that, the museum is closed because it's supposed to be closed from dusk to dawn. However, people come at night. So, that's not clear, and there is nobody living there. So, that cannot be controlled. So at a minimum, you could put a chain or you could put some device that says that, the museum is closed. You could also do a historic appropriate gate. This one is very close, at the Wayfield State and the Arboretum. This gate, I think it looks good, similar, type of condition. You could put some pillars or some demarcation that shows that you are entering, a space that needs to have some kind of control. Now we come to the special events. When we refer to the special events, we are basically talking about the amplified music events. I think there's been a confusion about if the special events are just the weddings or are there other kind of events that are special. I think when you see the conditions, it was never really clear to me, or I think to others, what these special events were exactly. Are they supposed to be related to the history of the museum or not? So I think a clarification is important to do. But for us, special events are the events that have amplified music, where many people come to the property and there is a lot of cars and a lot of activity. So those for us are what we consider special events. And of course, the weddings are special events. So we thought that for these special events, you had the parking lot and you had the overflow parking. However, that doesn't seem to be a condition that is being followed. And now many more cars are brought into the property, which is not something that we felt was part of the special permit. I mean, Historic New England, in 2015, we have read all of the hearings, we have seen all of the videos, say that they would use this parking as a maximum, which means that there will be some kind of control with the number of cars that come into the property. But that doesn't seem the case, and we think that's problematic. In this case, in June 2025, the parking actually went very close into the buffer area with the wetlands, which I think is not appropriate, for this condition. Even if it's just temporary, it seemed to be, a lot of cars and a lot of impact to the property. This is the 2025 list of events. Basically, they have 9 amplified music events. Are all of these events completely necessary to have? We wonder. I mean, there is some events that have 800 people coming to the property or 300 people coming to the property. Those amount of people will require a certain amount of parking that is definitely not the 48 and the 56 parking. It will need to have many more cars and many more parking allowed for that. We are concerned about this. I think the museum is not a event venue. Some of these concerts and outdoor theater and Kitty Knox play, are they really related to the purpose and use of the museum? We wonder. And we are concerned about the number of them and the size of them and the amplified music, which, it seemed to be a constant in all of these events. It's like, could we have a quiet event? Why everything has to have amplified music, with speakers? It doesn't seem very consistent to be in a residential area. Again, we're trying to find a balance between, being next to the museum and being in a residential area. And I think right now it's not slightly imbalanced. A lot of these concerts are free. We felt like the intention in 2015 was these concerts were going to be even for members of Historic New England, or there will be some way to control who's coming to the property. Doesn't seem to be. It seems to be everything is free. They encourage to become a member, but they don't have to be a member. So actually, Historic New England doesn't know exactly how many people are going to come for the event because they are not being registered and it's completely open. So you could have 1,000 cars coming into the property and they will not know how many cars are going to come or, or how it's going to be managed because they are free, because they are not registered. And also, we don't see how trying to control some of these special events will impact their operations or cripple financially the museum because the events are free. So how is it possible that trying to put some limitation is going to cripple their operation? We don't understand that. They're not getting any money from these events. The same with the weddings. The cost of the weddings is very minor. You can have a wedding for $900 at the Justice Estate. $900 just pays for the staff. So again, we don't understand why, these very low-cost events are so fundamental to the operation of the museum. When you read the letter of Mario, it seems like, they depend completely on these events, but it doesn't make any sense because the cost of the events is very, very low. And the other problem that we have is that we thought, at least from the hearing in 2015, that only members of the Appleton Circle of the museum could uh, ask for an event to happen, in the museum, a wedding. Right now, you go to the website, anybody can ask for a wedding. There is no, they don't even have to be a member of the museum to ask for a wedding. I felt that, in the hearing, it said that, Diane Vieira actually testified that only members of the Appleton Circle, which we are members of the Appleton Circle, you have to pay $2,500 a year, could request to have an event. That's not there. So, again, I think that could be tightened up. So these are some of the
How
things
much
that
more, really, Mr. Rosales? How much more do you expect this presentation to take?
No, that's basically it. It's just I'm just repeating here, what I have said that History England testify. I think you have seen it, so I don't have to repeat it again. But I think I'm finished.
Okay. Can I ask you? Are you accusing the Historic New England of violating the terms of the special permit?
I think the special permit, there is ambiguities in the text, and it's hard to understand, what exactly.
Well,
those
I mean, I'm sorry.
preconditions-
I'm sorry. Let me just. You've alleged. I just want to talk about the weddings. Are you saying that they're violating it with respect to the 12 amplified events, or are you questioning whether they are violating it?
Um,
I,
in terms of the wedding, what I was saying is that in 2015, when I read the hearing, it said that members of the Appleton Circle were the ones that were allowed to request a wedding at the location.
right.
That doesn't seem to be the case when you go to the website.
You say that, but do you know that? Are you asking that? Is that an allegation?
Well, I'm asking to clarify it. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else?
No, I think that's enough.
Okay. Is there anything else that the applicant the abutter would like to share with the board tonight?
Well, I would like to address
That was a lot. I just letting you know. That's like overwhelming in terms of the kinds of information that we're being provided with. And I'm trying to separate accusations of violation of the special permit from questions of what's going on up there. I have to say it's confusing to me. So I'm sorry, Mr. Hill, but there's just a tremendous amount of information that's being provided to the board at the extreme last minute. And it's hard for us to evaluate what's really going on, or what's really, frankly, what's really being asked. So perhaps you could clarify.
So I could just again address the responses from Historic New England, just on the 9 conditions that we proposed. The first had to do with parking. So we proposed a limitation of parking to what was shown in the plan. Historic New England rejected that. They don't want a limit on the parking that's allowed on the site. So with no limit of parking on the site, there could be 1,000 cars on the site.
But are there 1,000 cars is the question.
I don't know. We don't know if there's been 1,000 cars. Why does that matter?
Well, it matters because it's been an allegation that it's out of control, and I'm not sure that it is out of control.
No, I don't think we've alleged that. We haven't alleged that's out of control. We are concerned that without limitations,
The quote was, it's getting out of control. I've actually heard that. So, you know,
I think what I've said is that it could get out of control if there's no limitations. So the point is that there's been music festivals, there's been concerts, there's been weddings, there's been a lot of things that have nothing to do with the estate. And to date, these aren't horrible. There hasn't been major problems, but the concern is this grows and becomes something bigger than what was anticipated. So we're only asking for just limitations on what can be done on the property, such as parking. There's already 100 cars allowed. We don't think there needs to be more than 100 cars. If the board thinks it should be 1,000 or 200, that's your prerogative. But I think that the town of Milton has an interest in not seeing that this property becomes something different than what you all thought it was. So that's our suggestion, was to limit the parking to what was shown on the plan. Historic New England doesn't want a limit on the parking. So that's number one. Number two is the events. We again propose that there be 12 special events, and these are defined as events with 50 or more people. It could be sound amplification, it may not be, but these are large events. We think 12 is enough. It's not necessarily a sound amplification thing. So Historic New England doesn't want a limit on the events. They're okay with a limit of 12 weddings, but they don't want a limit on anything else that they're producing. They claim that that by putting a limit, as we're proposing, is crippling to their operation. We don't know why. We don't know what cripples it. They don't seem to be making money on these events. They're doing these for the public good. They hold craft fairs and music events that bring in people to participate in cultural enrichment. These are all positive things, but they're not money makers. So we don't understand why a limit of 12 is crippling. With respect to noise, we proposed tying the noise standard that was in your permit in 2015 to the state regulation. They didn't respond to that. With respect to having a staff member on site, Mr. Gittleman told my clients that there is no staff member on site during weddings. So if they're saying now there is, great, we'll just incorporate it as a condition. That's why we asked for it, is because we were told that there wasn't somebody there. With respect to the gate, they rejected the gate request. We don't understand why. They said that a gate would not be historically appropriate. We showed an example of the Wakefield estate with a gate that looks nice, aesthetically pleasing. There's all kinds of gates that can be historically appropriate. And frankly, we reject the contention completely because the driveway is new. This wasn't there before historically. So they added a driveway. Historically, there was a gate. It was the gatehouse. The gatehouse itself served as the entrance to the property. So adding a gate can be historically appropriate if it's designed the right way, and it doesn't have to impede emergency access because there can be a knockbox there. And I'm sure the fire department has had experiences with gates on private properties and needing to get in. And by the way, the gate's only closed when the property's closed. So we're not talking about a situation where an ambulance has to get onto the property. We're talking about middle of the night if an alarm goes off type of thing. Landscaping, I think that's the last big one. We've proposed what we think is reasonable. Historic New England has rejected it out of hand. They've claimed that it blocks their access. We don't understand these complaints. We don't understand if there's a cost issue. We haven't heard that. They claim that we can plant shrubs on the property line under the trees, which, by the way, the trees can't be removed under the preservation restriction that's encumbering my client's property. Planting trees in that location, we don't think they'll thrive because they're in the shade. And again, we don't think it's really a big deal to ask for the limited shrubs that Miguel has shown on that plan. So I'll end it there. I know it's been a long presentation. I appreciate the board's time and consideration.
Chair, can I say a few things?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So Miguel's been called many things, but thorough, definitely not. So I let him run the presentation and the whole thing. So I appreciate the board's patience, and I do think his images are pretty good. So I can't complain there. But I would just say quickly, it comes down to, we have a special permit for the museum. I mean, Eustace Estate, I grew up in Milton. It's like amazing that the property was saved. So just, some of the things that I've been surprised at is when on the site plan, it shows 46 parking spaces and 56 overflow. I mean, in general, I would read it as to say, okay, that's the maximum. And then I went back and looked at the hearing, and in Historic New England says, that's the maximum, that holds the events to a size. So I would say that clarification on that would be helpful. Security, on-site management, all the stuff about lighting and cameras and the gate. It's generally about just some extra security that we're looking for at night. The third thing would be, the landscape buffers. I don't think we've asked for anything that no one else has got. We're talking about like some arborvitae shrubs that are 3 feet high on some parking lot areas. If the Historic New England wants to work a deal, we can certainly give money towards the Appleton Circle to pay for some of the shrubs. You know, we love the museum, so we don't want to punish them. And then I think actually clarifying the special events, that was always an issue during the original hearing and what's considered a special event. I actually thought Attorney Hill had a good to say, listen, a special event is 50 people plus. Very simple, no matter if it's a craft fair or not, 50 people plus, do 12 of those a year. Historic New England members or not, as long as they pre-register, we know how many cars are coming. Honestly, I think it's just some clarification. The instant permit would do the trick. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Corey. Let me ask before I move back to the applicant, let me ask if any of the members of the board have any questions of the abutters presentation, the abutters themselves, or the abutters council.
I don't have any questions.
Mr. Hart.
I have one question. So the special permit was granted in 2015, and am I correct? You purchased the property in 2017?
No,
2018, I
No,
think,
2020, you purchased in 2018?
something like that.
Okay. And so I'm just, so the conditions of the special permit were in operation for 3 years prior to you purchasing the property. And, obviously the kinds of things that you're talking about existed at the time that you purchased the property. I'm just curious to know, in the 7 years that you've owned the property, is there anything that you're saying has gotten worse?
Well, I would say that for a couple of things. When we bought the house in 2018, I'll be quick. Historic New England had just finished the house next door, the mansion. As Marion testified, it was a 2-year restoration project. So I don't think they got going until like 2017. And then when they started going next door, they wanted to unload this house. So we bought it, we restored it. The restoration, honestly, Chris, was like, I mean, to say it was 4 years is an understatement. It was like 5-year project. So we really didn't start moving in here until like maybe 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago. Since then, I would say that there is an increase in, I would say it's a decrease in the number of weddings, but an increase in the number of like these jazz concerts and festivals.
Thank you. And
that
actually,
answer your question?
I'm sorry. Yeah, it does. Thank you. And I actually do have one follow-up, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind.
Mr. Hart.
It's really just to clarify. I think I know the answer, but and it was answered in part, I think, Miguel, by your talking about the fact that we're in the middle of summer. With the exception of the one picture that I saw where the leaves had fallen, am I right that all of those photos were on the Eustis property? They're not actually the vantage point from your property?
Some were on Eustis when we did the before and after renderings, but many of them were from our property because Dan Hill asked us to make sure you take them from your property, So we did. The close-ups, obviously, the parking lot, we took them from there just to show Marion and the group that it wouldn't block the view. But no, many of them are from our side.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Mr. McKettrick.
okay. Gonna go backwards because there are a few things that I'd like to comment on, but we do have members of the staff from Historic New England here. They may better be able to answer some of these. But I'm going to have to sort of jump around a little bit. I guess, as you understand our response in the landscaping, part of the problem is that it's very hard to understand what the problem is. I'm not sure what's so unattractive about the 1-story, what now is a reception building. It's a nice looking building. It's a brick building, has a little piece of trim around the top. And the parking lot isn't a paved parking lot. It's a natural gravel lot. It is a parking lot. So, and most of these events that we're talking about are during the daytime. There are some things that I think around Christmas time, there's a couple of events in the house that may use the overflow parking. There might be then some nighttime, because it gets dark earlier, parking with light, you would be able to see some lights at that time. But, just weren't really sure how severe that problem was. The other thing that's confusing, at least to me, is if you want us to, you want Historic New England to put some low screening around the edge of the parking lot, then why do you need low screening down at the bottom of the property? And you can't put it right under the trees because you have the same problem you do. It's not going to thrive. So, I mean, what are you talking about? Are you talking about putting landscaping halfway up the hill? Because that's the whole historic vista, the open field. That's the way it always was. I'm not asking you to answer. I'm just pointing out to you why the landscaping request was confusing, I would say, to Historic New England in terms of why it's needed. But those are the
Chair,
comments.
can I talk to
No,
Mary?
here's the
Things we
thing. Here's the deal. Here's the deal. Okay.
I want to make a dialogue. so we
No,
can get-
John, hold it. Okay.
All right.
We're not going to have a conversation between the abutter and Historic New England. We're going to either have a hearing in front of the Board of Appeals at which we adjudicate this dispute, or you're going to get together and talk to your neighbor. But you're not going to do it in a public forum. It's
Okay.
just not right. It's not fair. I agree with I agree with Historic New England here. The presentation is confusing. I don't understand what's being asked. I'm not even sure why it's being asked. And it feels to me like the paper that we've been submitted is a little bit different than the slides. It's confusing. So I'll put it to the parties. I will support a further continuance of this if you want to have a conversation, or the board will consider it. But we can't have a hearing where we just go back and forth, where asking questions of each other and supplementing materials that we've already been over. So I'll put it to the parties. What's your pleasure?
Can
Marion?
I just say, I just wish that Marion reached out to us before she sent the letter to you guys.
Here's what happened. Well, we had 2 weeks. I'm sorry. May I just respond in terms of the
Please.
timing of response?
Please.
I sent the letter a week ago and I said, we will meet. We suggested Friday afternoon. Apparently, none of you were available then. And I said to Attorney Hill, perhaps we can come up with another time. So we would have met with you. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of time between the two hearings. Some of the Historic New England people were on vacation the week before. I haven't had a vacation. And this stuff just goes on and, it's the way it is and I accept it. I'm happy to be around, and if it would help, maybe we can do some more with that. Maybe when you hear some of my responses to your most recent comments, maybe it will be clarifying, maybe not. So perhaps I can just quickly go through some of them.
Please.
Just in the matter of the gate. Please don't use the Wakefield gate as an example of a good gate. The Wakefield estate is run completely differently than the Eustis estate. It is not open all the time. In fact, I was very surprised when it first opened to find out I couldn't just walk in there with my grandchildren and walk around any day of the week. It's not open, and that's why there's a gate there. It's open, it's closed most of the time, and then there are hours and it's open. It has all kinds of great programs, of course. But I don't think that's a good example. I don't know whether it would be a much less, I haven't discussed this with Historic New England, whether, it's a chain that was closed. It would mean that at sunset, somebody has to be there to put the chain across. The reason for not doing it is what's really wonderful about this property right now is that it looks like the private property that it was, but it's open to the public. And I can go up there at 8 o'clock at night with my husband or somebody else, and we can have a snack if we want to. We watch the sunset, and then as it gets dark, we can leave. And we're not worried about, the locked gate at 8:30. If there's a problem, a real problem, then there needs to be a solution. I don't like the locked gate. We have them in other places in the town. The fire department has to have keys. It's complicated. In the case of the historic Eustis estate, it would be a disaster if there was any delay at all getting emergency services up there. So I really want you to rethink the idea of the gate. I said, you can have cameras. They're inexpensive these days. They can be live feed cameras. They can be monitored. And if there are people up there after dark, then we'll we can do something about it. It's even possible to have a live feed direct to the police department. We have that in a number of places in town. So there are other ways to monitor the security. I don't know if the gate's the best way. Anyway, so much for that issue. I'm very confused on the limitation on events. I think the problem here is Historic New England has more than 12 events if you add them all up together. They're all different kinds of events. Some are indoors, some are outdoors. As far as music events go, you can't have outdoor music events that have no amplification. I mean, I'm pretty familiar with all of that. There has to be some. I think what you, I'm reading between the lines, I think you're objecting mostly to the amplification, maybe I'm wrong, at a wedding where it can be very loud and, you know, that's why those events are limited. And that's why those are described as amplified music events, because those can get quite loud. And if there is a problem, we need a mechanism for complaint and resolution. I think the limitation in the number of events just pretty much ties their hands at Historic New England in terms of what creative uses you can make of the property. Because an event, you know, a craft fair is a very different event from a concert. And they're indoor events, they're historic events, there are events that stress cultural celebrations. They're all events that bring people to the property and show them the historic property. And that's why they want different types of events, and that's why they want a variety. And the idea that they should limit, I don't know how you would arbitrarily limit. I have to ask the question that was asked. I'm not expecting you to answer it, but it's not out of control. So why do we need to do something like set an arbitrary limit? Okay, on to parking. Sorry, going backwards here. Again, I read the original special permit very carefully, and the permit itself says that the overflow parking is the minimum that must be provided. It says nothing about, and this is the absolute, this is the number of cars you can have on this site. And there are plenty of other special permits issued in Milton that say exactly that. So it appears that the Board of Appeals, at least at that time, did not want to set such a limit, and it restricts what you can do. But on the other hand, it's deceptive in some ways to say you have an event that has 800 people. It depends on the type of event. So if you have a craft fair and 800 people attend, they don't all attend at the same time. They're not parking all over the site. They might need some additional parking beyond the overflow that's provided because, you know, it's an event that you want people to come to. You mentioned tickets and registration. I've discussed this with Historic New England, and you do have to register for their events. They don't necessarily have to pay, but they do keep track of their numbers, and for a number of reasons, you know, for a variety of reasons, because they feel there is a capacity to the site. Perhaps that, I mean, that's a fact. They can correct me if I'm wrong, but that we had that discussion, and that's what they told me. Some of the events that you showed flyers for, you do have to pay. Quite a few of the events you have to pay for tickets. Some of the concert events you have to pay for tickets. So in addition, for those events, you know exactly how many people you have coming to the site. So, all right, going backwards here. As far as weddings not having, I'm getting confused here again on management and what management means. You can hire management for an event. That means you have on-site management. That doesn't mean an employee of Historic New England is necessarily going to be at the site. So when Historic New England says they have management at each event, they mean they have management. The management may be provided by an outside management entity, may be provided by Historic New England. Some events, I know the staff, some of them, Peter Gittleman is here tonight. He personally was one of the people managing parking at one of their recent concerts, making sure people went to the right places and so forth. So they certainly have Historic New England staff on site for many of these events. Okay. Lighting, you know, I think the proposal that Historic New England made to shield lighting toward your property is the appropriate one, and that's how it's done when you have problems. When you think a lighting is shining towards your property, I think that's a legitimate complaint. It's addressed by providing shielded lighting. That means the lighting shines down. They can't have no lighting because the lighting in the parking lot is designed to shine down. So in the overflow parking area, when there is evening parking there, they do need lighting for safety reasons. And if you want some shrubs put along that parking area, you're going to have lighting to make sure people can find their way back to the bathrooms. And that's absolutely essential. The only bathrooms available are in that reception building. Okay, well, I mean, I think we agreed to 4 or 5 conditions that came out in the discussions we've had at these hearings. And that was only after a lot of study and talk. um, with staff at Historic New England struggling with these because it's pretty hard to define precisely what you're trying to get at. And in general, you know, if you just say there has to be a set size to number of people who attend, there has to be a set limit to the number of events. I think that that was never how it was set up to begin with, and it doesn't allow Historic New England to try to craft particular new types of events that they haven't even thought of. But just going back to weddings for a minute, they only have one tent platform. Their weddings can't be that large. They do make money from the weddings. And if they had 12 per year, they would make a lot more than they do now. It just hasn't worked out that way. In many ways, this site isn't the site that a lot of people would want for their weddings. I don't know why you even mention the smaller size, you know, a wedding for 15 people. I don't see how that's intrusive on anyone. It's a lovely idea. I'm not sure how many people would like to do it, but those lower cost weddings were for very tiny groups. You know, those are my quick comments in response to some of your responses.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're
And
welcome.
if anyone from I'm sorry, if the
No,
chair
go ahead.
wants to allow someone from Historic New England to fill in where may have missed something, I would appreciate that.
You're welcome to do that.
So I don't know.
Mr. Gittleman.
If I can just clarify that there is always a Historic New England staff member at every single public program or private event. There has been since day one, and there always will be. We would never allow anybody to be on site running an event without our staff there. It is absolutely true and never has been any different. So if there was a misunderstanding in the past, John, it was a misunderstanding. We have always had functions managers running our events. Just wanted to clarify
Gentlemen, let me
that.
clarify that. Mrs. McKettrick writes, a condition that HNE provide on-site management at any event on the premises. Are you saying that it could also read correctly, on-site management by an HNE employee?
Absolutely correct.
All right, and the reason I say that is I don't think it certainly wasn't apparent to me that on-site management could be done by a vendor, and that's not the intention, is what you're saying.
We're very protective of the site.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else, Mr. Gittleman? Mrs. McKettrick?
Not at this time.
Let me ask members of the board if you get any questions of Historic New England representatives.
I just have one quick
Mr.
question.
Brown.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. For the events that are not weddings, such as craft fairs, such as jazz concerts, am I correct that did I hear you correctly that all of those events require a pre-registration, or are they open to the public who may come and go as they want?
May I address that?
Peter can address that, yeah.
We do provide an opportunity for pre-registration for virtually every one of our programs, but I think as many people understand, a lot of people wait to see what the weather is going to look like and see what their days look like. So we also have a walk-up opportunity. For example, our last concert sold out with 50 visitors. That was, I think, on July 10th. And we had 11 walk-ups who we sold tickets at the visitor center, and then they went and joined the concert.
Thank you.
Okay, so is it fair to say, sorry, follow-up question, fair to say that it's difficult to understand ahead of time if an event is going to be less than 50 or more than 50 attendees?
It is virtually impossible unless we limit, because we need to sell it out. For example, if it's an inside program, we have a 99-person limit, and that includes our staff. And that's that number's provided by the fire department. And so we will often limit an indoor program to 80 people simply because we cannot afford to have somebody walk up. And if they do, we turn them away.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Mr. Hart?
Just
Question?
yes, just a couple of questions, Mr. Chair. The first has to do with the shrubbery or the greenery, whatever, I can't find the word. And I'm just thinking practically here. I understood, Ms. McKettrick, the point about the greenery by the lot line. That made a lot of sense to me. I guess as a practical matter, I do wonder about the proposal around the parking lot. And because just looking at the various maps and photos, the issue about sight lines, I'm not sure makes sense to me, at least in reading your letter and listening to your comments, but maybe I'm just missing it. I mean, I've been to that property many times. I live nearby. I know the sight lines that we're talking about. Though there, I'm less clear. The only thing that made me wonder about that area of the proposal was what you just mentioned about safety and finding bathrooms and things like that. So I just wondered, practically speaking, does that really present a real problem just around the parking area on the other side of the parking area? Leaving aside on the side of the lot line.
May I respond?
Well, who's,
Is it it's helpful if I respond?
Sure.
I'm happy for Mr. Gittleman to respond, Mr. Chair.
So two different issues. The first is the issue between the tent pad and the bathroom building, the visitor center. So typically what happens is that the bathrooms, the doors to the bathroom are on the right-hand side facing 1452 Canton Ave. And the former place where cars would have driven into the mid-20th century garage, that's where cocktails typically takes place. There are often high tops out there. And then just beyond there are a few large trees. And then just beyond that is the tent pad, which is the only site that we ever have a wedding tent on. So typically the side facing the visitor center is left completely open so that visitors can walk directly from the tent, from their tables, across the cocktail area and then directly into the bathroom buildings. So we want to make sure that that wall, that edge is easy to penetrate, basically by visitors wearing wedding heels.
I see. So if I understand correctly, Mr. Gittleman, the issue then in putting some kind of greenery there isn't really so much the sight lines as much as it is the ability to actually use that space during an event for people to walk, essentially. That
is indeed the practical. The sight line also is a issue if they get beyond 2.5 or 3 feet, because the big glass windows that we have where the garage doors used to go up provide incredible views of the grounds facing 1452. So we would hate to block those with 6-foot trees, keeping them low as we have around the corner where the little holly are is perfectly fine. One can see over those, but it's really a practical reason for that particular edge. And the edge along the south-facing side of the parking lot is that if we park cars nose to nose in that location, right along the line where the lamps are, the posts for the outdoor lighting. And so if we had a shrub there, it would, along that edge, it would push our operation even further, closer to 1452 and closer to the wetland as we are forced to basically move another 5 feet in that direction. We also like to keep that open because our parking patterns change all the time depending on the type of event. So sometimes we have a central parking alley in the middle of that parking lot, and sometimes it's an in and an out on the edges of it. So by putting shrubs along the middle section, it completely eliminates our ability to be flexible and make a decision about how we want to use the parking, the overflow parking.
I appreciate that explanation. I'm sorry if I missed it in the materials, but that makes a lot of sense to me. And my last question, Mr. Chair, is just about the lighting. I understand. It sounds like, just based on this discussion, there might not be any remaining dispute about lighting, if there was one, in the parking area. But it sounded like there was some other lighting, and I just wasn't sure where those light posts were that were not in the parking area, if any.
Mr. Gittleman? I'm sorry.
So I think that the lights that are in dispute are the 2 lights that are supplementary lights that were added on the back side of the existing posts. And I know that, Miguel, you mentioned that it's possible to have a light from the other direction run by a generator. But a lot of the programs that we use, that we run out there in the wintertime and at dark, evening concerts and things like that, are obviously indoors, do require the overflow parking. And there is no generator for that. And frankly, for weddings, there's often not a generator either, because when we upgraded the electrical at the Eustis Estate, we made sure that we had the ability to power a full tent from the corner of the house.
Thank you, Mr. Edelman. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions by the members of the board?
No.
Anything from the abutters at this point?
Mr. Chair, just
Mr. Edelman?
a closing comment, and then we can discuss sort of next steps. It just strikes me that in the town of Milton, if I'm proposing a 3-family house or a commercial building of 800 square feet, I need site plan review. And site plan review is a permit that's issued by the planning board that have multiple conditions, including protection of adjoining premises, traffic and parking management arrangements. And yet this project doesn't need that. And I feel like, again, what we're trying to do is just impose some reasonable criteria and discussion over things like parking management. And, the response that we can't have any buffers and screening because that impedes our flexibility to park cars. To me, there needs to be a balance between the right of historic New England to make productive use of its property, which I think we all agree with, but also the interests of the town of Milton that are explicated in the zoning bylaw and the site plan review provisions about protecting adjoining premises, especially in a residential zoning district. So I would love to have a conversation with Historic New England. I think, we were disappointed that the letter came in last week without any outreach to us. And the letter basically rejected everything that we asked for. So we didn't feel like there was really any sense of sitting down with them Friday afternoon or yesterday. But we're happy to. I mean, if there is an opportunity to have some discussions about compromising on some of the screening, the parking issues, the lighting, sounds like the lighting is almost there. We're happy to do that. So if Historic New England would like to do that, we think a continuance would make sense.
Well, I don't know, that seems to me to have been that would have been a really good opening comment, but we're an hour and a half into the hearing. I mean, I did offer to the parties before, but I think the board's ready to debate this issue. I mean, I've got a couple of questions, and I'll let people think about how they want to handle it. But let me ask the Historic New England, how often does the property experience a large volume of parking beyond the parking area and the overflow parking that's in the permit? How many times?
For weddings, so for
I don't,
just a number?
Just in general,
I would say a dozen times a year.
12 times a year.
Include public programs and private programs and private events.
That's exceeding the minimum. So
That
just
is-
to be clear, the issue at the hearing, with Mr. Hill was at and I was at, well, it was not a maximum, to be clear, so that there was no confusion at the time. The issue was whether or not there was enough parking. And because the question is whether or not Historic New England was going to be able to generate enough attention at the property to be successful, which was the goal. So there was no suggestion that it be a minimum. What I mean, a maximum. And what I'm trying to figure out is how often does the parking area that's been identified be exceeded on an annual basis?
So I would say that the main parking lot, which is the 50 spots on the gravel, is exceeded probably 12 times a year. And
what about the overflow area?
The overflow area is where I would say beyond the overflow, beyond the basically, let's say 100 spots that we have, is for the Fine Arts and Crafts Festival and the Juneteenth event and the David Chestnut Jazz Festival.
Three times?
So I would say 3 to 4 times a year when we have to stake beyond the parking plus the established overflow.
Okay, thank you. A question of Mr. Hill. Is is Historic New England not subject to DEP's noise reg?
You mean absent a condition?
Yeah, absent a condition.
Yeah, no, I think so. Yep.
Okay, so, but you're asking for the town to have specific enforcement over it? Is that the question? It's not so much that you want it to be subject to the reg. It is subject to the reg.
Yeah, no, I think my suggestion was just to put a standard into it.
Yeah.
Because I think the original condition said there shall not be any excessive noise or something to that effect.
Yeah, I think there was probably conversation at the time that the town really didn't have the ability to measure it. Yeah, that actually could have come from you because I know that's one of your areas of expertise in terms of particular knowledge. But I specifically recall that, and that's a concern of mine. To me, the regulation is the regulation. It's required to be, so making it a condition of this permit where the board and the town, frankly, lack the ability to actually enforce it, I think is a bit of an issue. I'm wondering what you thought about that.
I don't feel strongly about it. I was just trying to put in a standard because the state reg says you can't exceed 10 decibels over ambient. So
Yeah,
I was just putting something to reference so that
fair
Historic New
enough.
England knew what they could and couldn't do.
Yeah, what I would suggest, I mean, I'd rather not, just speaking as one board member, and I know we're not in a deliberative phase, I just don't have to have conditions that are difficult for us to actually enforce. But I will take notice of the fact that at this hearing, we've established, and Historic New England can speak to this, that the law is the law, and that, they, like everybody else, is required to adhere to it. Mrs. McKettrick, do you object to that statement?
No.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. Hill, I being mindful of the 9, and I want to make sure that we're addressing each one. So I just had those 2 questions. Let me ask if there's anybody in the audience who would like to speak with respect to the application, the renewal of the permit, which is the subject of this hearing. But it's not a particular application, so I won't ask in favor or in opposition. Let me just see if there's anybody who'd like to be heard. For either in support or in opposition of the renewal of the permit. Bill?
I don't see any members of the public raising their hands to speak.
Okay. Does the applicant, I'm sorry, not the applicant, does Historic New England have anything that they'd like to share with the board before we break into deliberative consideration of the matter?
I'd just ask Jeff whether Peter or Carissa DeMora or Peter have anything to add.
Well,
I think I've said my piece and you have my letter as well.
thank you.
No?
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Hill, anything further?
No.
Okay. So unless members of the board have anything further, if the applicants have anything that the participants have anything they want to share, I think we can close the evidentiary portion of the hearing. Mr. Brown and Mr. Hart, do you have any questions?
No.
All right. And I know, Mr. Hill, you made an appeal to have a conversation. We're going to move into the deliberative phase, and we're going to decide this right now in accordance with the open meeting law. So that's what we're going to do. If there's an objection, and now's the time to raise it.
No, I think I was just responding to what you had suggested, Mr.
Fair
Chairman,
enough. Fair
earlier
enough.
in the hearing, and we're open to conversation. That's all I was
Yeah.
saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mrs. McKettrick, you okay with us proceeding with the decision on this matter?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let me ask the members if they want to hear. If they don't want to hear, I'm happy to speak as the acting chair.
I concede my time to the chair.
Miss-
As do
Miss
I.
Hart. Okay, all right. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Corey, Mr. Rosales for raising this to the attention of the board. I did note at the last hearing that the board took this matter on its own volition because I felt as the acting chair that it was having issued this permit 10 years ago. It was time for a permit checkup. I'll also note that the permit by its terms can be reopened at any time. And thirdly, I'll note that this is not an enforcement matter. There has been no allegations of violations of the special permit. Mrs. McKettrick has pointed that out. I asked the abutter if there was specific violations. Now, should there be a violation, the board can reconvene a hearing at any time and discuss the violation. But I don't know if there's any violation. What's going on here, I think, is a review of carefully considered conditions at the time that was, and I know there are people in this hearing that participated and that were carefully considered, and there were multiple people who participated in this, most of whom lived on the hill. What was decided in 2015 was a bargain with the town, between the town and Historic New England, to save the resource. There's no denying that. The abutters have admitted that. And that creates some expectations that I think go to an important point that Mr. Hart made about what the situation was at the time that the abutters purchased the property. Now, it may not go to the specific merits of each and every allegation. I understand that, but it is not a situation where an abutter has come in and changed the circumstances surrounding the conditions under which the permit was issued, which is the standard for the issuance of the permit. That is not more detrimental to the society, but it was clearly a bargain that the town was interested in saving this historic resource. It was under threat, and it cost a lot of money. I understand that, and it's on the record that that all of that's been done. And in fact, there's nothing in the record to indicate that there have been any complaints about the operations since it opened. In fact, from my perspective, it's been overwhelmingly successful. And I think we should acknowledge that to Historic New England. We should also acknowledge the investment that Mr. Corey and Mr. Rosales made in the rundown property next door that, as I recall, was actually owned by Historic New England at the time. Isn't that right? And that's a credit to you. But it doesn't follow that the board, in my view, should or could get into managing the Eustis estate. That's in fact the opposite of what we want to do. We need to impose conditions on the reasonable use of the land and on the facility, but not micromanage its operations. Historic New England has proven to be a good steward of the resource. And, as evidenced by its success, the lack of complaints. I'm not saying things are perfect. Don't get me wrong. I don't want that to be misread. But taking a property that was very private and turning it into a public asset that the town is very proud of, and people visit, is quite a success. And it certainly exceeds what I had expected in 2014. I think that the conditions that the Historic New England has agreed to, which I'm going to read so that everybody understands what is in the letter, are reasonable, and I think strike at some things that are appropriate for a tune-up, providing the Milton Police Department with 24-hour contact information for the site manager at Historic New England to be used in case of an emergency or request by a neighbor for an ongoing event. Excuse me. A condition that the on-site lighting be dark sky compliant and shielded so as to not shine onto neighboring properties. That H&E erect no trespassing private property signs at various locations, which has been already done. And it sounds like a small thing, but I'm not sure it's a small thing given the circumstances and the wandering nature that the Blue Hills can provide. And lastly, a condition that H&E provide on-site management by an H&E employee at all events, at any event of the properties, which has been noted to be the current practice. I know there's been confusion, but these to me respond to several of the conditions that the abutters have raised. Now, to be sure, they don't respond to everyone. I think the landscaping is a confusing issue, but Historic New England has noted that it will make its operation more difficult to operate. In fact, present a threat. Same with the special events. I think in the absence of a clear violation of a permit condition, I don't think that the permit condition should be modified for that. It feels like a dispute over the sightlines and the view that the abutter has of the parking area. And reasonable people can disagree, and in fact, at this hearing, have disagreed as to whether or not that view is sightly or not. It has been, there's been, there's been testimony on both sides. I think these could, I suppose, at some point get out of control, but there's been no evidence that it is out of control. And that in the absence of a specific enforcement action, I, as one member of the board, aren't prepared to impose conditions that may make it more difficult for the museum to operate than it currently is, therefore threatening the resource and undercutting the very thing that we're trying to protect and the bargain that's been struck. Now, I understand it's a carefully structured balance, but I also pointed out that the board at any time can call another hearing and open it up to the extent that this is viewed to be out of control or out of enforcement. But we don't want to manage the Eustis Estate. We want Historic New England to manage the Eustis Estate. And indeed, it's in the town's interest that it be successful. So all of that contributes to my recommendation, or my feeling that the permit should be renewed on terms and conditions that are the same as 2015, modified as set forth in Mrs. McKettrick's July 15th letter and modified by Mr. Gittiman's clarification. And it should remain the case that in the event of a violation, the board can call a hearing and impose additional conditions to the extent that they're deemed necessary. Now, those are my preliminary thoughts. I know I went on, but that's my thinking. I'll ask my board members to supplement or speak to those.
Yeah, I can go first. I mean, I agree with you, Mr. Chair. I think that, as you mentioned, the purpose of the permit was to encourage these kinds of events. And the conditions on both properties at the time that the applicant purchased their property have not changed. It seems that things are occurring the way that the permit intended. And I'm also mindful of the fact that should the scope of the permit be violated, or if there's any need to, the applicant can come back before this board. So I agree with your suggestion.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Hart.
I'm also in agreement. I'll say two things. The first is that I appreciate where the abutters are coming from. I appreciate that they want to enjoy their property as best they can, and I don't question the sincerity of where of their concerns. Ultimately, I agree for the reasons that you've already stated, Mr. Chair. But I'll also add that sort of to emphasize a point that I not only do I think that there's really no reason to modify any further than what is in Ms. McKettrick's letter, but also I think it would be a mistake to modify based on what I'll call a set of slippery slope arguments, or to say, as we sometimes do in the law, a parade of horribles. My hope is that those things never happen. It sounds like it's in everybody's mutual interest that they don't. But if they do, the board stands ready to reassess. And ultimately, that's why I land where I do.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. So the board, let me put this in. Mr. Brown, is there anything further?
No.
Let me put this in the form of a motion. I'd like to make a motion that the board support the extension of the special permit, subject to on the terms that were issued in 2015 with the same extension provisions, subject to the conditions that were in the July 16 letter from Mrs. McKettrick, modified as per the comments that I made. Let me make that in the form of a motion. Ask if there's a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, I vote aye as well. So unanimously, the board has extended the special permit. I want to thank the abutters for the time that they put into this, Mr. Hill as well, notwithstanding the fact that I was mad because I got it late, but I did read it during the hearing. So, and I think that we appropriately addressed each and every condition that's been raised, and have made it clear that the board stands ready to enforce the special permit that it has issued at any time, should that become necessary. I hope that it doesn't become necessary, because I've heard both parties be interested, and I know there's personal relationships here, and I'd encourage you to open the dialogue, and in fact, maybe an open dialogue could have avoided this hearing. I don't know, but once we started the hearing, I wanted to continue it, so I'll just close on that. I'll also say the board will issue a modification to the special permit, amend the special permit, and it'll be effective on filing, subject to the 20-day appeal period. We'll provide that to Mr. Donnelly. Unless there's an objection, Mr. Brown or Mr. Hart, I can prepare this and get that to you in the next few days. Mr. Rosales, do you have a question that you'd like to
Can
hear?
I just,
Mr.
Chair, I just wanted to thank the board. I don't think we realized that the board could open up the special permit at any time. So we felt like the 5-year was like the time to do it. So I think that was really helpful that you told us that. I do wish that we could define the special permit a little bit more, but that didn't happen. So we just keep going. I do hope that, Historic New England and us, we are in this together. We both have these historical properties on big lots, and I really try to use this house. The name of it is Applecroft, and Peter Gittleman told me that name, and I was like, what's the name of the house? So we're in this together, and I do hope that we can continue on. And certainly the board, if they want to see, and Marion wants to see Applecroft fully restored, it truly is a gem in this town. I'm very proud of it, and I welcome any of the folks here to visit the house. It's very special.
Is that the
Thank you.
is it the Attorney General's house?
It was,
Yes.
and he had llamas here.
I don't know about that. I mean,
No,
I
he had
don't know
llamas,
that.
I've
I
been
don't know,
told, and it
but
was
I
a
thought-
bright yellow house.
I thought that was Mr. Quinn's house.
He had parties, he had a big catering kitchen. He must have had parties probably bigger than Eustace's estate.
Yeah, he'd have his friends down from Savin Hill, I think, from time to time, is what I heard. But we don't need to talk about that at this hearing. Because we all know he's really from Dorchester, so, as are most people from Milton. I'm going to walk back my volunteer to write the hearing. I'm going to ask Mr. Hart to write it, if you don't mind, Chris.
I appreciate it because I was going to do so anyway.
Well, Mrs. McKettrick knows that if I write it, it'll be a while before I get to it. So, but I appreciate that, John. I may take you up on that
Please.
at some point, but I want to thank everybody for participating in the hearing. And unless there's further a matter before the Board of Appeals, I'm going to adjourn this meeting.
Thank you.
Meeting's
Thank
adjourned.
you.
Thank you very much for your cooperation. Good luck.